Hi, I'm Paul Foranbi, aka IncrediPaul, and welcome to IncrediPaul Leadership, where we learn how to become the most incredible versions of ourselves by learning from each other. Thank you for those of you who have been listening to the podcast, and special shout out to those who are watching the podcast. So this is your first time, maybe you don't know, you can listen as well as watch on YouTube. If you're listening, just click the link in the show notes, and then you can watch on YouTube as well. Regardless if you choose to listen or watch, I really appreciate your support in all I do and just listening to the podcast and engaging with what I have to offer. So, this episode is a little bit different. I think I've been saying that a lot the last several times, but I was able to give a talk for NALA STEM, the National Alliance Leading the Acceleration of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. It's a mouthful to just say NALA STEM or NALA. So it's a nonprofit that I founded and current president of that helps to unite, support, and build community among all historically excluded peoples in STEM. So we did a professional development series earlier this year, and this episode was from April. I did one talking about leadership, all the stuff I talk about on the podcast. So this dives a little bit deeper. There's discussion as well. I know I've had some other times that I've talked about leadership, but every time there's a group of people, there's different questions that come up, different stories that come up. So I really enjoy doing it. But I got to speak to a live audience of people who are a part of Knowledge STEM and other people who just support us in a variety of ways and wanted to be a part of this session. So it's live. Hope you enjoy it. Give me feedback if you want more stuff like this or you want to see other stuff that I've done live. Regardless, I hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in.
Turn this up, turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Leadership styles vary. So I would say, like, as far as leadership is concerned, it's not a complex topic. It can be overcomplicated, and there's a lot of aspects of leadership. But there are different leadership styles. But at the same time, it's just understanding which style works for you, because you can try and gravitate to another person's style, and it's just not you. So you're not going to feel comfortable. You're just like putting on someone else's shoes. They're two sizes too small or two sizes too big. You got to figure out what your leadership looks like. That's a good thought. And then your thoughts on what is leadership?
I was thinking more of how a leader kind of sets the culture and like guides the group towards focusing on certain goals or deciding the focus of the day, kind of facilitating the relationships that you can have with other people in the group that you're part of.
Yeah, I like that. Especially
So
the vision and goals piece. It's been said that if you don't know where you're going, anywhere can take you there. So it's kind of funny to think about, but you need a leader to set the vision where you're headed, where the organization is headed. So that's definitely one aspect of leadership. That's a good thought.
you kind of mentioned it before, but the form of influence that somebody has, it could be for good or it could be for bad. Like, so I know when we think of leader, many of us try to think of the positive side of leadership, but unfortunately there is also bad leaders. So one of the, I mean, but they influence people to do what they wanted, right? And so just as an example, like Hitler or whatever, but so it's that I think that within leadership, there's, like I said, you said it before, it's the level of influence or the opportunity for influence that that particular person has on another. They be good, bad, or whatever.
Absolutely. And I really like that you mentioned influence and that it can be used for good and bad. I'll say, yeah, Hitler is definitely an extreme example, but he was a very powerful leader from his influence. And so that's the thing, like when we think of leadership, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. So really being intentional about what your that's like a whole other topic about what your values are as a leader, like caring for people. There's a really great quote, and I think I have it in here, but I'll say it now. I think it's worth repeating. Yeah, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So if you think about any leader that has really had an impact on you or someone that's left an impression on you, you probably had a feeling that person cared about you as a person just beyond a number or position. But no, really great thoughts. I feel like you all could just teach this for me. I don't think I even need to teach this. You already know all this stuff, right? Yes. So a few things. So John Maxwell, like I mentioned, leadership expert and guru, he says that leadership is influence, nothing more. And we kind of mentioned that, like Hitler was an extreme example. But when you think of influence, that really changes the whole game. That's why I call this thing leadership as influence. So oftentimes we think of leadership as just a title, just a position, which yes, there are leadership positions, there are leadership titles, but there are also people in leadership positions that are not really leaders because people don't want to do anything they say, or they do the very minimum just to get by. But think about influence as far as yourself. What does influence look like for you? Whether it's with a parent and a child, between your coworkers, friends, even with your boss as well. So a lot of times we think of it, like I mentioned, like a specific position. I have a manager title or I have a supervisor title, like I know Myra had in the chat earlier. Yes, those people are in leadership positions, but think about your influence as well. So I'll pause there. Any questions or thoughts around expanding beyond leadership as a title?
So, Paul, just to clarify, you're asking us to think about our spheres of leadership, or could you clarify?
Yeah. So where are some areas that you have some influence? It might be in your position, it might be in your personal life. Like who are some people that might come to you like with questions or advice and you're kind of influencing that?
Got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. And like I said, throughout this, any questions, definitely keep them coming. I want to make sure it's as interactive as possible. So I'm in STEM and we love statistics, we love figures, all those things. So I cannot give a presentation without sharing some of that stuff. So the first one is from the Harvard Business Review. It says 58% of people say that they trust strangers more than their own boss. 58% of people, you pull someone off the street and they will trust them more than their own boss. Global studies reveal that 79% of people who quit their jobs cite lack of appreciation for reason for leaving. And then a recent study by careerbuilder.com shares a whopping 58% of managers say they didn't ever receive any management or leadership training. So, do any of those statistics surprise anyone or stick out to anyone?
I'm
I
not
would,
surprised at all.
You say
This
you're
seems
not
about right to
surprised at
me.
all?
oh no, go on.
Yeah, go on. You were really low for me. You say you're not surprised?
Testing. Is it working?
You're like cutting in and out. I don't know if it's just me. Can everyone hear her okay?
I can hear her fine.
Okay, it might just be my
Okay, I can try again. Is it
Okay,
still
I can
cutting?
hear you now.
Okay. I was saying that I'm not surprised at all. I feel like this really represents my team currently. Two of our coordinators have left.
Mm.
The manager position is opening. I'm actually interviewing tomorrow.
Okay.
Um, but the entire team feels that the director does not appreciate us as a team. And then the director asked me how she can appreciate us. And I was like, I've been working a year and a half now. You're asking?
You waited a year and a half. Wow.
Yep.
So yeah, I feel like there's a lot to unpack there, but you're seeing it directly. So you agree with this? Anyone not agree with this?
I am a little surprised about the first statistic that strangers would be more trustworthy than the bosses that um people surveyed think they have, but for the
Yeah.
other two, I think it is telling that it's really important for management to think about their leadership with and their relationships. So yeah, I'm not too surprised about the other two.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt the same way. The first one surprised me. The next two, I'm like, I can see that for sure. All right. I think Amani, you have a question or thought?
Oh, I had more of a thought. It was mostly that I was thinking that I feel like a lot of what people traditionally think leaders as is kind of more focused on the task at hand more so than the people carrying it out. And having it more task oriented is less, or it leads to an environment that's less satisfying for the people who are doing the job because they don't feel like they're being considered. And so it's I guess being a good leader is being able to balance between getting whatever done, but not at the expense of just the well-being of whoever's doing it.
Yeah. I would say that's what happens when people you try to manage people. You manage things, you lead people. When you try to manage people, that's what happens. Absolutely. So good thoughts. So leadership is a lot of things, but some four things I'll focus on initially. It's like I mentioned that leadership is influence, like a lot of different aspects of influence we already covered. It's also priorities because it's been said that if you focus, if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority. So it's up to leaders to prioritize things and understand what are the right things to do. It's been said that managers do the right things, but leaders do things right. So it kind of goes along with what I think what Myra said and Amani said is that you can be doing, there's multiple ways to do and say everything, and you can do them the wrong way if you have more of like a task focus or a people focus. And people can see that. We can feel that if you're just trying to steamroll over you to get the job done and they feel like an obstacle, but you see them as an obstacle. Another thing is that leadership is listening. So I don't know if your parents or your mom was like my mom. My mom said I have two ears and one mouth for a reason, that I need to be listening more than I'm talking. And so the key thing behind this with leading is that, yeah, it's a laughing emoji, that you need to listen first. When you listen, you can learn. When you can learn, you can lead. A lot of times, especially like when you enter a new organization or a new environment, when you try and just go in there and just start making decisions, but you haven't listened first, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, which is normal. Like I talked about resilience in another talk. Failing and mistakes are normal, but failing to listen is not something that leaders should really have to struggle with often. I mean, it happens, but it shouldn't be recurring. You should be intentional about listening so you can learn and then lead. Leadership is also motivating. So I don't know if anyone has any stories about either leaders in their life or maybe even you as a leader that people were motivated by you and what you were doing. So I'm going to open it up, and I really appreciate the interaction so far. What stops you from pursuing leadership? Or is there anything stopping you from pursuing leadership? Either one.
After saying that I don't look at myself as a leader, I did realize I do have a pretty big leadership role with my students because I'm a
Mm,
professor. And so I see myself as that
absolutely.
type of leader, but to think about leading my peers is a little bit different for me.
Mm, okay.
And I think one thing that probably would get in my way is that I'm a perfectionist, which means I'm not very good
Mhm.
at delegating, so I would
Mm,
probably just do everything myself so that it's done the way I want it to be done.
yeah. No, I'm laughing because I can definitely relate to that. So I call myself a recovering perfectionist. Like the ing is important. Recovering, like in process, continuing to work on my perfectionism. Because yeah, like you were saying, Erica, that you often know that you can do it right by doing it yourself. But what I've been learning is that when we don't allow others to do it, we almost take that learning away from them. We don't allow them to fail. So I see a comment from Myra saying, I strive for excellence. Can you explain that?
Oh, instead of being a perfectionist, I say
Oh,
I
okay, that's
strive
what
for excellence.
I like that. Striving for excellence. Yes. No, that's good. Are you wondering what's next? Has everything you tried failed? Or maybe you just feel stuck? Then coaching might be right for you. The coaching relationship is a relationship totally centered on you. If you're tired of running on the hamster wheel of life and want to start to see results, reach out to IncrediPaul for help. So what are you waiting for? Go to incredipaul.org/coaching, IncrediPaul.org/coaching, or at I am IncrediPaul on all my socials. Or you can click the link in the bio for your free coaching session. I want to make sure you become the most incredible version of yourself. Imani, you have something?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I guess my problem, or the problems I sometimes run into with pursuing leadership, is feeling like it's almost the opposite. Like I don't know if I know better, or not even better, but I don't know if I have what it takes to make the best decision. So it's almost like self-doubt.
Self-doubt.
Yeah.
Like imposter syndrome? Would you
Yeah, I
say
think that's a
that?
big part of it.
Okay. I think that definitely happens. It can happen with leadership. And I think part of it is realizing, and I've been learning this, is that there's never really going to be a time that we know everything about a subject. And if we do, there's just always more innovation coming, that we're constantly growing. And so it's really the balance between what you know and what you don't know. And there's this whole concept of like unconscious conscious or unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. And I'll just in short say that you go from not knowing what you know to a place that you're so good at it that you don't even realize how good you are at it. But all that is, it's like with any skill, leadership is a skill. So leaders, some people are quote natural born leaders, but that doesn't mean they don't have to develop their leadership. I think if anything, they need to work harder to develop their leadership because they have that gift. And so gifts are not something that you just let them sit off to the side. Like when you have a gift, it's your opportunity to continue to develop it. And that just means that the more effort you put in, you two people can put in the same effort, but you have a gift, so you're going to get more output out of it. But I think just understanding and really owning that imposter syndrome, which I've talked about imposter syndrome, and it affects everyone. I would say, and there's been studies on this that before they thought that it affected women and minorities more, but especially they said they thought it affected women more. But what actually is that women are more likely to voice out their imposter syndrome, but men will not say anything. But when they did a double blind study, it was pretty much neck and neck as far as people saying that they experience imposter syndrome. So that's something interesting to think about. But and I say that to say the power, what gives imposter syndrome power is when you're isolated and you feel like you're the only one going through this. Simply voicing it out and reaching out for help, that causes it to lose power. And there's other things you can do, but that's just the first step. Really good thoughts. Like I said, you all could be just teaching this. But some things mentioned, so not being a born leader, and like I said, like all leaders are born, we're all born, but just because you are a natural born leader, that's neither here nor there. Other thing, title and seniority making you a leader. So yes, seniority oftentimes can lead to leadership just because you have that competence, but you have to be careful with seniority because with any skill or anything you're developing in, as soon as you feel like you've arrived and you stop learning, you just start to regress. Especially with leadership, there's not this place where you just plateau and be like, I'm on top of the world. I'm a great leader now. I don't have to work on it anymore. No, that is the worst place to be because we all have blind spots, but I would say there's more blind spots when you've had all this training, you've been doing this for a while, and you start to take it for granted. Another thing is work experience makes you a leader. It can, but I will say that just because you have a ton of work experience does not automatically make you a leader. And what I see often talking to people is that they say, I'm not going to work on my leadership until I get into a leadership position. And I would say you can do that, but it kind of puts you it makes it difficult only because in a leadership position, you're learning a lot of different things. And there's also a shift when you're leading. So when you're like an individual contributor or a technical leader, whatever it is, the focus is on you and you achieving. When you transition to a manager or leadership position, the focus is no longer on you. The focus is on you empowering others to succeed. And so a lot of times talking to people, like people get promoted because they're really great at being an individual contributor. They become a manager or a leader, and then they struggle because they're still trying to do the individual contributor work. And as a leader, that's not what you're there to do. There might be some time and work that you specifically have to do, but you're really there to empower and develop your people, remove roadblocks, all of those things. Any questions on that? Or thoughts? Yay or nay? So some quick tips on leadership. And like I said, there's so many different ways to develop your leadership. And I would say you all did a really amazing job just by being on this call, this workshop, this talk on leadership. Is just realizing that leadership is something that you're continually working on, having leadership conversations, talking about your leadership, talking about what you do well, what you don't do well. And I think it's really important to focus on what we do well, even more so than what we don't do well. I think a lot of us high achievers or perfectionists, like we were talking about earlier, reminder, I'm a recovering perfectionist, is that it's really easy to focus on what we're not doing well. And yes, there's always going to be things we need to work on, but we need to be kind to ourselves and understand things that we're doing right. And even when we do things that are wrong, not focusing so much on what's wrong and actually focusing more on what can I do to make this better in this instant. And sometimes what you need to do to make things better is simply just taking some time to just stop. It can be as simple as that. But getting involved, next thing is thinking of yourself as a leader. So mindset is so critical in pretty much everything, but especially in leadership. I think it was Henry Ford that said, if you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right. If you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right. So all that is saying is what you are saying to yourself, whether those are positive things about yourself or you have limiting beliefs or self-limiting beliefs. That's redundant. You have limiting beliefs, but you need to be careful about what you're saying to yourself. And the thing is that when you are intentional about what you're saying to yourself, you will be surprised at how often you're saying negative things to yourself. And those negative things are not helping you in any way. And all that, you can get help with coaching. And I'm still working on that stuff, but coaching helps. It's helped me, coaching, mentorship, all that stuff. Another thing is reading leadership books. So I will say that audiobooks count. So maybe you don't want to read a physical book, but you can listen to a book. My wife gives me a hard time that I listen to books at like 2 or 3 times speed, but I'm like, gonna try and I can process it a lot faster than then they can say it. So I turn up the speed. But listening to them, reading them, even podcasts. So that's one of the reasons why I launched the podcast is really passionate about leadership, wanted to connect with other leaders and continue to have those leadership conversations. So I tell people every time they join the podcast, I feel like, yes, people listen to the podcast, people enjoy it, but I selfishly think it's for me as well, because I get to have these conversations every week with leaders all across the country, even globally as well. So be intentional, books, podcasts, audiobooks, conferences, workshops, networking as well. But any thoughts on any of those things? Does anyone do any of those things that work well for you or want to do?
I just appreciate that you mentioned that it's a mindset to think of yourself as a leader. Since yeah, I've been reading Atomic Habits, and it does say like the identity that you have for yourself is um almost deterministic in terms
Mhm.
of what you feel like you're able to do. So yeah, thank you for the reminder, Paul.
Absolutely. I love Atomic Habits. James Clear is a genius. It's a great book. Absolutely. Any other thoughts?
I did have a
All right.
question on how you
Oh,
would
go for it. Go
yeah,
for it.
on how you would utilize networking in leadership.
So when I say networking, it's more so being intentional and reaching out to people who are leaders or are striving in their leadership. So, like, let's say you go to a conference or you go to a talk, or maybe it could be in a class or something, maybe someone that's leading a project. I think it's just being intentional about making those relationships with people is what I mean by that. Because ultimately, leadership is based on relationships. Does that
Gotcha.
make
That makes
sense?
sense. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, good question. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. So I will switch gears and talk a little bit about NALA because I think this goes really hand in hand on leadership. I think mainly because have the opportunity to lead this organization with a lot of phenomenal people that make it happen. And I would say, so let me skip forward to this. Okay. What our mission statement as far as uniting, supporting, and build community among all historically excluded peoples in STEM. And so I bring up NALA is that NALA, at least for me personally, is an opportunity for me to practice my leadership in the traditional leadership title kind of form. So I mentioned that leadership is influence and it's different relationships, which I get to do that in a lot of my relationships. But what I've been really intentional about, and then definitely people on the call that have seen me for a while, definitely feel free to call me out if you don't feel like it's true. But I try as much as possible to empower people to be leaders because, and I'm gonna get into this. So we honestly, like, we haven't even got into the meat of what I want to talk about, which is the 5 levels of leadership. This is all the precursor, if you can believe that or not. But I'm really intentional about the people that are on the team and really allowing them the space to develop as leaders. So there'll be often times where there's a question or something that we can do or different directions we can go. It could be as simple as even just having these leadership development sessions, or not leadership, professional development sessions, or stuff that we're doing with our logos or colors, all that stuff. It could be really easy for me to say, I'm the president, I'm the founder, we're going to go and do this because I say so. But what I've realized is that when I do that, or when any leader does that and they take like a hard fist and say, this is do as I say or nothing, is that you automatically limit the you automatically limit how great your organization or group can be to just what you're capable of. So just being really intentional about understanding where maybe there's specific strengths I have, others people have other strengths, but I try really specifically to draw out the strengths from other people, even if I may have other thoughts or ideas. But I stuck on this because, and I've been telling the team this specifically more focus on this year into last year, is that everything we do at NALA is focused on this mission statement, reminding them that what we're doing, or is it uniting? Is it supporting? Are we building community among all historically excluded peoples in STEM? And really, that's the foundation, and it can build on there with our values and go on from there. But as leaders, I think it's really important to not try to create followers, but try to create other leaders as well. And that's a whole other thing that I'll get into. But yeah, talk about NALA, what we have as far as members, like 250 members across the United States now. It's phenomenal. The growth coming up on 4 years this October. So it's been good. I know some of you have been part of that journey from the beginning. But yeah, any questions or thoughts, or maybe a call out? Maybe I'm not doing that as well as I could be. Like I said, leadership is growing. There's always room for growth.
Paul, I actually wanted to ask, what was your motivation behind kind of focusing on young STEM professionals versus any other group?
Oh, like for IncrediPaul? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, well, that's a good question. And I would say, honestly, it took me a while to get there because it took me a while to get there because I was doing a lot of stuff with students and I was doing a lot of stuff with young professionals. And then I also had a lot of people that were reaching out to me that were more seasoned, that were maybe in like 50s or 60s, even 70s at times that would reach out to me for stuff. And so what stuck out to me was who are the people that I feel like need it the most or can often be overlooked in a sense. And so what I thought was that, okay, I guess students can be overlooked, but I think when you're in school, you still have that framework, you still have a lot of resources. When you're a professional, not to say that you have everything together, but I think you actively get more resources and stuff poured into you as you progress in your career. But I could just think back to, and even really still consider a young professional, but more in the later stages of young professional, is that oftentimes as young professionals, we don't know what we don't know. You kind of just in transition from you're in college or vocational school, whatever you're doing, and you're getting into your career. And there's a lot of things you don't know, and you're just trying to figure it out. And so that took me iterations. And I would say like even as like early as recent as like the last 6 months, I was more intentional about saying young professionals because I was saying college students and young professionals, but I was saying like a lot of stuff, like as far as like the leadership stuff, that yes, you can do it in college. And I do talk to a lot of students and empower them in their leadership. I feel like a lot of the resources that I've been maturing and growing caters more to people in that young professional range, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good question. So I'm sure you all have probably read this slide because I've had it up there for a while. But I'm going to go into the 5 levels of leadership because, like I mentioned, just having a leadership title does not make you a leader. The leader's what makes the position. It's another quote from John Maxwell. But with the 5 levels of leadership, you start at the lowest level and you work your way up. And the important thing to note is that it's not like you leave one level to go to another level. No, you still have to apply the things at the first level and you're just building on it. So I'm going to skip over that just so I can get through this. I'm gonna get through all the levels, explain it fairly quickly, and then just open up time for questions. More questions, I could say. We've been having questions throughout this. But just so I don't keep anyone in suspense, what the 5 levels are. 5 levels are position, permission, results, reproduction, and pinnacle. So I'll go deeper into all of these. And I've talked a little bit about this throughout this presentation. So this kind of brings it together. I would say the first level is probably not a surprise, or maybe it may or may not be a surprise. I'll see what you all think. But the level one, like I said, there's 5 levels. Level one is position. That's the first level, basic part of being in leadership or influence, just a position. And so the key thing behind this is that people follow you because they must. So think about maybe you may or not have this situation. I personally had this situation. I'm not in this situation now, but you have a leader that you don't think is doing the right things or not empowering you or not leading you in the right direction, but you follow them because you need your job. Like that's just basically you have to follow them. Like you don't do what they're saying, like assuming that it's all like more like morally right, legally right. It's just like some things you're like, this is not the right way to do this. But like, you want it this way, I will do it exactly this way, that kind of thing. But they place all their authority based on their position. And I would say that the first level is not a bad place to be. It's only bad if you just stay there and you just try and drive home that I'm a leader. You have to do as I say. But it's an opportunity to learn at this level. So I would say a lot of times, so my background's in chemical engineering. A lot of times that engineers, when we go different rotational programs, if you go into industry, we're kind of thrust into leadership positions, sometimes right after college or like a year. And so you're like, oh, you're this supervisor or you're this team lead, and you know nothing about the process or nothing about the organization, but now you're leading. At that point, I think they've gotten better about it now, leading like 30 people who have, some of them have been working there longer than you've been alive. And so at this level, you have the position, but you have to learn at this level. The other thing, if you've ever seen leaders that are not strong leaders, is instead of them telling you, hey, we should do this, or this is the vision, this is what we need to do, they will reference their boss, whether she or him, reference them and say, Kathy wants to do this, or Chris wants to do this, instead of saying like, hey, this is what I think we should do. And that's because they don't feel like they have enough authority as a leader. So they're trying to borrow their leader's authority. Level 2 is a permission level. So people follow you because they want to follow you. So this is a good place to quote again from John Maxwell, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So at this level, you need to listen well, you need to observe well, and you need to serve well. You have strong relationships with your people. I will say that having strong relationships does not mean that you go out for drinks with them all the time, that you're their best friend outside of work. No, it does not mean that. It's okay to have that as a leader, but you just have to make sure you have those boundaries set up, because it's really easy. And I've also been on this side as well, where you have a leader that wants to be the friend of the people reporting to them and then does not hold people accountable. And you don't want to lean over to that other side either. So going through these quickly, but if anyone has a quick question, let me know. Level 3 is the results level. People follow you because of what you've done for the organization. So I mentioned the position level, you just have the title. The next level is that you get to know the people. The results level is what you're doing. And a lot of times people over-index to one or the other, is that they have the position and they're like, okay, I'm really good at what I'm doing and what I continue to do. So I'm going to continue to do that, continue to get results, continue to push people. But then they stopped focusing on relationships. Or, like I just mentioned with the person not holding people accountable, is that they focus on relationships and they're having fun, and then the results suffer. To be a great leader, you need to do both. You help the team get things done, leading by example, creating momentum, and attracting better people as well. Level 4 is reproduction. So I talked a little bit about this a little earlier. What I'm actively trying to do more with Nala is not just lead followers, but lead leaders. But as reproduction, people follow because of what you've done for them. The leaders are great not because of themselves, but the ability to empower others. How much greater is it when you can lead someone, empower them to do something, and they don't always have to rely on you? I think a lot of times leaders think that it's a strength if their organization cannot function without them. It's actually a weakness. It means that you have not empowered people to do the work. Yes, you still need someone to cast vision, keep people on track, But if you're someone as a leader and your ultimate goal is to have the spotlight on you and things can't run well or do things can't go well without you being there, that's not a good sign of leadership. I know I'm going fast, but the last level is the pinnacle level. So the pinnacle level, I would say, is not a level that most people will really ever reach in their lives. It's more so something that people give to you. And this really transcends your position or your organization. So people follow you because of who you are and what you represent. So when I think of examples of the pinnacle level, I think of like the Mother Teresa's of the world, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Dalai Lama, like all these people that when you think of them, even if you're not like in that association or religion, you recognize them as great leaders because of what they've done, what they stood for, proven leadership over and over. So at this level, this is something people bestow on you as far as being a leader. So I know I went through those pretty quickly. The summary is right there, but any questions about those? All right. I either explained it really well or not well at all.
Well, Paul, I'm kind of curious, how do you use the 5 levels of leadership? There's categorizations of why people might follow a certain leader, but how does that apply to like what you can do with it?
What you can do with it as far, so it's more so what you're striving towards. And for the longest time, even when I was doing this 5 levels of leadership, I was not in a leadership position. So, and I can go back, but so even if you're not in a position level, like I mentioned, the level 2 level is a relationship level as far as caring for people, understanding them. That's level 2, and then level 3 is actually doing things right. So I think what is important to understand is even if you're not in a leadership or management role, you can still work through these different levels. I don't know. Does that make sense, or did I not explain that well?
No, I think I understand. Thank you.
Okay. And if it's not clear, let me know, or if anyone has any questions about it. But it's just understanding that, because and that's why I mentioned is leadership is influence. Is understanding that leadership is not just the title. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to people, like they're not in a leadership position, it's like, okay, I don't need that because I'm not in a leadership position. And this is really out of the scope for this talk, but there is such a thing as leading up or leading around, because there are certain ways you can bring up conversations and bring up things even though you're not a leader, and get that influence as well. It takes time, but you can do it. I know I've had the opportunity to do that at lower levels and had being able to talk to like directors and even VPs about different things in different organizations I've been at. Right. So kind of we'll wrap things up. I like the 10 commandments of 5 levels. Kind of the things that kind of wrap it up is that the 5 levels of leadership can be applied everywhere. You're at different levels with each person. So that's why I mentioned that level 5 is a really hard level to get for anyone, because let's say that me, just from like a student perspective, that you're in college, you have been a part of that university for a while, you're in part of student organizations, everyone knows you really well. Maybe you've gotten to level 4 and you're president, you were able to train someone else as president, vice president, whatever it is. As soon as you go to another location, another organization, you start from the very bottom. You might maybe level 0 because maybe you're not even a leader at that point. So it's understanding that yes, you can be at certain levels with certain people, but that doesn't translate across to where you've gone to different places. And so I've seen this as well, that people will talk about, oh, I did this at this organization, I did that at that organization, or I was able to empower these people. But the question they're going to ask, and you're probably thinking as well, is, okay, you did that over there. What are you doing here, though? You did it over there, but what are you doing here? So being intentional about realizing that just because you were good in the past, it might have gotten you to where you are currently, but that doesn't mean it's going to keep you there. So the other thing is that influence goes up when you add a level and you're building on levels. You're not just leaving a level as well. If you skip a level, you have to go back for the longevity of the relationship. So like I mentioned, like if you're trying to get the results, you haven't built the relationship, there's a lot of mending you're gonna have to do. And some people, I mean, it's up to them. Like some people, you can go back, mend the relationships. Other people will write you off. It's just one of those things you have to be careful of. Other thing, higher you go, the longer it takes. Each time, and I already mentioned this, anytime you change jobs, enter a new circle, you start at the bottom, work your way up. I think this is another key thing. It must be maintained at the level. So yeah, maybe you have done a lot of stuff pouring into people. You're at level 4, you're reproducing leaders, but that doesn't mean you just stop. You have to continue doing it. There's really nothing permanent in leadership. I would say I might go as far as like in anything, but I think especially in leadership, it's not permanent. And finally, you can add or lose influence on a level. So just because you're at a level does not mean you can't go down. It is much easier to lose levels than to gain them. So it's very similar to trust. It can take years to gain trust. It can be lost in a few seconds. So it's be really intentional about it. So wrapping things up as we're out of time is really think about the influence that you have. And then in the matters, think about what people are coming to you for advice or for assistance. So a lot of times we're kind of blind to different things when we don't think about them. So as you start to think about your influence, you start to think about what are people coming to you for advice or assistance. That's probably where you have leadership or influence in. And also, what happens when people follow your advice? Are you leading people down the right path or not? So, yeah, that was really it. Questions, comments, concerns? Can you all hear me?
No, thank you, Paul, for this talk. It was like a nice, thoughtful reminder for me to think about our spheres of influence. And yeah,
Mhm.
it was nice to listen to. Thank you.
You're welcome. Like I said, with leadership, it's a constant process. There's no way I can talk about all of the aspects of leadership in an hour talk, but there's just like initial discussion just to kind of whet your appetite, I guess. Any of your
This was
thoughts or
great.
comments? What?
This was great, Paul. Especially preparing for my interview tomorrow. I feel like even saying stuff that I think you've mentioned previously is
Mhm.
really impactful. And there's some
Awesome.
things I want to continue to look up and focus on. So thank you.
Absolutely. If there's any support you need from me, either before or after the interview, let me know.
Thanks, I will.
Absolutely. That's good. Well, I hope you all got something out of it. I appreciate you taking the time. I know there's a lot of other things you can do with your time. Your time is valuable. So thanks for being here. You can stay connected with me on socials at I am IncrediPaul or LinkedIn, Paul or Ibuku Olua RMB. So links to those are in the show notes or online, wherever you're watching or listening to this. Keep being incredible.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible. Incredible.